share my screen. Save that. Okay. Now I'm looking at our textbook. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the tech staff has settled on Edge this semester as our web browser, and I'm not used to using Edge. So if you see me struggling, that is why. I don't know, with all of Microsoft Teams and everything, they're saying that Edge is the browser of choice for on campus, so I'm trying to go along with it. Now, in Chapter 1, if you read through the material, there's going to be a lot of terminology that you might want to start making notes about. Next time in class, we'll look at our study groups and a facility for some shared note taking, things like that, but I want to wait until Monday to do that. But all of these terms for different development environments and all of the different Microsoft pieces like .NET and the different pieces that are involved in C# development are important. So there's some good information in that reading. We're going to start out here about page 17, where it says building console apps using Visual Studio Code. So if you have your textbook, that's where we'll be. If you don't, that's okay, because we can look at it together up here on our shared screen. Now, whenever we're using Visual Studio Code is a newer development environment, just an editor, a place to type code and to test it and to see what's going on with our code. We call that an IDE, an integrated development environment. The Visual Studio Code came out as a freebie a couple years ago, and it's just had a huge amount of success. Everybody really, really likes it. You can use Visual Studio Code for C# development, for Java, website development, all sorts of different languages, but you have to get code configured for the language or the environment that you want to use. Now at home, you might have to use the download information that they include in the textbook to download Visual Studio Code, but we don't need to do that here because it's already installed. So on your start menu, let's see if you can find it. And if you notice, mine, when I started typing Visual came up with Visual Studio, and I'm looking for Visual Studio Code. So code has this blue icon. That's the one that we want to use. Now, when you first open it, it's just kind of set up, ready to be configured. And I honestly don't know how Visual Studio Code is configured in our classroom. We might have some issues. There might be some things that we have to fiddle with. That's okay. We can get it all worked out. So the first thing they say to do is, oops, I might need to back up just a little bit further. Hang on. Oh, yep. The download steps and everything start on page 7 of our textbook. So let's go through kind of what you would do if you were at home. I have the PDF, this online version of our book. So it is a live link to take me to the download site. You would just type that in if you have the hard copy book. And then we also want to download and install .NET 5 SDK. After we get both of those pieces installed, we're going to update our Visual Studio Code application to install the C# extension. So in Visual Studio Code, we want to look at extensions. So if I look at my code, I don't see that. So I'm going to choose View, and then I should be able to find extensions under my View menu. Does everybody see it? Is it working on your computers? You've got Visual Studio Code. It's all good finding it. Let me know if you're running into any trouble. Now, when we go to the extensions window, it just kind of opens up over here on the left in this bar. We're going to find C#. So they say it's one of the most popular ones. You should see it at the top. I don't see it at the top. I'm going to search C#. And there I see some C# stuff. And that's the one we want at the very top that just says C#. I'm going to go ahead and install that. And we should see that it installs some things and tells us a little bit about the C# extension that we just installed. Now, if for some reason you needed to get rid of that, you could uninstall it by coming back to this extension screen and just clicking on it. All right, so what else do we need? They say that C# is the main one that we need, but there are some other extensions that we might like. They mention C# for Visual Studio Code. That's the one that we just installed. And then they talk about MS Build Project Toys. I'm going to search for that. You know, while I've got this C# up here, though, we do have a lot of extensions and a lot of snippets and things that we can try. Let's keep it just plain vanilla, only having the C# extension installed right now. But we do need some of these others. So I'm going to look for Tiny Toy. I don't see it. It does change very quickly. So if I search for MS Build, I do find it. We want this MS Build Project Tools. Let's go ahead and install that. Do you find it? Got it? I love we have two sets of twins in here. Isn't that cool? That's neat. Okay. So we found our toys here. I hope they're fun toys because we need some fun. The next one we want is the C# XML documentation comments. So I'm going to search for that. C# XML. So for me on my list, it's like the third one down. C# XML documentation comments. Let's install that. We want the REST client, REST. Let's install that. And one last one is called ILSpy. Aha. It's a decompiler. So that means if we found somebody else's code is an executable, we might be able to revert it back into code. I'll install that. Now, all of those were in the list on our textbook. So at home, you should be able to go through and find those same ones and get them all installed. As you see, there are lots and lots of other C# extensions. So let us know if you find one that's really cool or really helpful, and we'll get it all installed so that we can all use it. Now, if you were using Visual Studio, the full Visual Studio, that costs money. We can get it free here because you're a student. But if you were a developer out in the real world, Visual Studio itself could be several $1,000s. That's one reason everybody likes Visual Studio Code so much, because it's free. So it does take a little bit of work to get it started, getting all those extensions installed. But once we have that done, we shouldn't have to fiddle with it too much anymore at all. So now I'm going to go back to writing that first program. Oh, I want to check our .NET. We should be able to look at our computers and see what versions of .NET we have installed. On my Start menu, I'm going to go to the Add or Remove Programs option, Control Panel, and I'm going to look and find what we have. Well, we have a lot of Windows Software Development Kit and other Microsoft Visual Studio things, but I'm not seeing any specific installs for .NET 5. So let's install that. So there's quite a bit in our textbook telling you about the progression with .NET. What .NET is kind of like the back behind the scenes piece that's letting C# work, that's letting it run. And with .NET, we can run that on multiple platforms. So your C# code that you develop could be run on a Linux machine or a Mac if you're using .NET. With the real Visual Studio, it would only be Windows compatible. So it makes a big difference. All right, so let's do this here. So they say that we can enter some commands to see which versions we have installed. So let's try that. I'm going to open a command prompt. Type CMD. There, I just typed a C and I found it. Now let's try this with a Windows command prompt. We'll see if we can enter these commands. So it says I want to do .NET --list -SDKs. Ooh, look, I'm glad we did it. It says we do have 5. Now, the other .NET command we could use is .NET --list runtimes. Because as we saw in our add remove programs, it's not reporting to Windows very well. So we have to do this command. To get to it, oh, thank you, you guys. Keep everybody going. So in our runtimes, it looks like, again, we do have 5. That's what I'm looking for since our textbook says that's what we need. We do have it. So yay, we shouldn't need to install anything.
What are we looking at to see? What was your runtime again? What does that mean?
It just means what versions. Like if you created an application using .NET 1, we would have to have that runtime on our machine to run your application. So that's why we have so many more runtimes installed than actual development environments. So really good question. The SDK is the System Development Kit. So that's the part that lets us code. And then the runtime is the part that will run our applications. So we have those both pieces. Now, this gets down into the nuts and bolts. And you guys, this is one reason that Visual Studio is kind of easier to get started with. But once we've got Visual Studio Code working, it'll be easy peasy and you'll really like it. So I'm going to scroll ahead a little bit. We checked our .NET platform. We've got everything good. I'm going to write my first program. So it says start Visual Studio Code. We've already done that. On Windows, navigate to File, Open Folder. So I'm on my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to choose File, Open Folder. Now, where do we want to put our stuff? I think we want to put it on our OneDrive. So I'm going to go to my OneDrive. Now, you might want to have your organization a little bit different on your OneDrive, but I like keeping things in my Documents folder. So I'm going to create a new folder inside my Documents for CIS150-101. On Canvas, you'll see some instructions for how to change some of the properties of this folder to make it work better for you as you're using it for Visual Studio development. But for now, I've got the folder created. I'm going to choose Select Folder. Oops, I should have gone further. Let's do that again. File, Open Folder. Now I want to go back to that new folder I just created and open it. And inside of it, I'm going to create another new folder. And this is going to be Chapter 01. We want to go into that folder and create one more new folder. This one is going to be Hello CS. Now, try to get this folder structure created properly. Could be kind of a pain, but up here in your toolbar, your address bar actually, you should be able to see exactly where you are. I'm in my Hello CS folder that's inside my Chapter 1 folder, that's inside my CIS150-101 folder, that's inside my Documents folder. Now, if you're not super comfortable with the Windows file system and folders and things, you know, do some practicing. Look for some training online. It's important to get comfortable with knowing where all of your files are and how your file system is organized. Finally, I'm going to choose Select Folder again in my Hello CS project. Now, this is what I want Visual Studio Code to look like. I should see over here in the left hand Explorer showing me my Hello CS folder. Everybody okay? No problem? Good job. Kind of messy, but once we've got all our structure in place for our folders for our projects, we'll just be able to go right to that spot to create a new one. So this first time is the worst. Now, we've got our folder selected. They say now that we want to open up a terminal window. So I actually have this option here for terminal. I could also choose View Terminal. What a terminal window is, new terminal, is going to be down here at the bottom of the screen. And it's basically looks just like that command prompt that we were looking at earlier. but I should be able to enter some code. I don't see where it's at. There it is. I've got this little scroll bar down here at the bottom. Check yours. Mine had like scrolled down. If I scroll back up, I can see the prompt, and I should be able to type there. The command they want us to enter is .net console. So we're just saying that we want to create a new console project in this folder that we have open. I'm going to press enter. What's it doing?
I don't know what I'm doing.
You want to show us your screen? Let's see what you got. Show it to us. She's got us. So right up there at the top where it says terminal, do you see that? Do new terminal. And then you should be able to just start typing down there. So it's kind of weird how it doesn't really have a cursor, a prompt for you. So you want to just type .net new console. You're okay, you can still just type it. You don't have to worry about that stuff. You got to type .net. What is it doing to you?
I didn't know it recorded your voice and like wrote it down in.
Yeah, I keep trying to turn that off because it says I say weird things sometimes. So don't look at that transcription too close. Any luck? Can you tell what's going on with it? Is it letting you type that? Why don't you close Visual Studio Code and let's open it again and see if it's just being wacky. Now we're sitting at our project. Has it got the right spot there? So you should just be able to start typing right there, .net. Just no matter what you type, it's doing something weird. You got to type the whole command. Is it not letting you? There, it's doing it. It's doing something because I see it creating folders. I think you're okay. So let's just slide that terminal window back down and we'll see what happens. I'll go back to mine here. When I press enter, I should see some messages telling me that my console application was created. Just like we saw on her screen, we should see some new files get put into our Hello CS folder up there. So we now have a project file and our actual programs. Now, once this project file is created for us, we're ready to actually type some code. And our code is going to go into this program.cs file. So let's click on it. Voila, finally some code. Does everybody see that? Does yours look that way? It look the same? Now, this is actually a program that's already written for us. It's already got the code in place. Let's see what yours looks like.
So what it end up doing, you, I guess it just allows you to just type code, I guess.
Yeah, I just created a default project for us, a console project,
Okay,
just a little hello world.
I got
Is it letting you share? There it is. Oh, click on the next one down, the program.cs.
There we go.
Perfect. Okay, that's the one we need. So if you're not seeing this same kind of code, click on that project.cs file. Okay. So this is our first program. It wrote it for us. It's a Hello World program. Let's run it, and then we'll talk about the code that it supplied. How do we run it? Well, we use this run command, and we should be able to press F5, if you notice, to run also. So we can either use run, start debugging, or we can just press F5. I'm going to do that.
it. You want to select the .NET Core?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I get the right one. They don't really say, so let's do it. .NET Core. Now, down at the bottom, we have several tabs. Mine right now is looking at the output tab. If I had any errors in my code or anything, they would be showing on this output tab. But my program actually said hello world out to the console. So I'm going to look at the debug console and see if I see my message. I don't. Oh, they say it's in the terminal window.
Mine's in the debug console.
You do see something?
Close it and hit F5 again and it ran.
Did it run it? Okay, let's try it.
Well, close the launch.
Ha ha. There, it finally did it. Keep being persistent, you guys. You got it. Now, this is what we see when it actually ran. And I am seeing it in my debug console. I did switch to it automatically. I've got all these yellow messages about all the different things that were loaded to support my application. And then this blue message, the hello world, is actually the output from our program. So it took us a little bit to get it to run, but they gave it to us. So that's awesome. Now, what I'd like to do is take a look at this actual code that we ran before we go any further. So let's copy it. Just select all of the code in your program.cs file and then copy it. And let's use something really dumb like Word. Look at this code. Word hates code. You know, Word likes everything to be all pretty and formatted, and code is not. But I want to use some things that we can use in Word to take a look at it. So if you've got Word open, just go ahead and paste that code in there. I really wanted it to copy it. I'm going to try that again. Let's see if I can paste differently.
Paste it in the middle one.
Middle one. That's what we want. Thank you. So I don't want this stupid image up here. I want the actual code. So be careful, be aware of that. We're using Visual Studio Code, so you might have to specify. Okay, so like I said, Word hates code, but we're going to use it anyways just to take a look at it. The first thing in our code is this using system statement. That tells C# what system libraries to bring in for our program. So we'll always pretty much see this using system statement at the top. We might have other using statements that we would have to add, but we usually have to use the system. Then the next thing is our namespace. For our namespace, I'm going to grab a highlighter up here, a text highlighter. Let's just use yellow. And I'm going to highlight my namespace statement. Now I want to use the same yellow to highlight the opening curly brace under that namespace statement. Now that curly brace is called a delimiter. And in C#, that's the hardest thing for people to get used to, are all these curly braces everywhere, these delimiters. It can really be hard to look at. So that's why we're going to highlight them. Now, this is the opening delimiter, the opening curly brace, and it has to have a matching closing curly brace. Here's my matching closing curly brace down at the very bottom. Okay, so notice how those go together. Those define everything within this namespace. This namespace, they named it the same thing as our folder, if you notice. Okay. Now, the next line of code is our class statement. Let's grab a different color. We'll use green. And let's highlight our class statement. Now, our class statement, just like the namespace statement, is sort of just like background noise. It's not stuff that you're going to worry about coding right away. It's just stuff that has to be there for C#, because C# is dumb. C# is not smart like Python. C# is dumb, but that makes it faster, right? Because it's going to compile down into a faster executable than what we have with a smarter language like Python. Now, our class statement also has a set of open and closing curly braces. So let's highlight them. There's our open. Down at the very bottom, right above the yellow one, is our close. Notice how the code was placed into our file with those being aligned. That's not something that happens automatically. The programmer has to do that. But if the programmer keeps curly braces lined up in the same indentation pattern, then they're usually pretty easy to match up. But man, if they're all in column 1, we can have a big old mess of 5 closing curly braces at the end and about 75 errors. So we have to be careful with our curly braces. So first is the namespace. Next is the class. Our class will usually be named program here at first. All right, let's go to another color then. The next line that we have is this one that we're going to call the main method. Now, we're not going to be looking at creating these statements ourselves to define methods for several chapters. So for right now, we'll be putting all of our code inside this main method. Let's highlight its curly braces, open, and close. Perfect. So now all of the code that we write is going to go in between those. I'll make it chartreuse. So that's our code. Now, I like to color code like this just because it really, really helps us identify the pieces that we have to have. This one line of code said, I want to use the console and I want to write a line to the console. The line that I want to write is this string, hello world, the string within the double quotes. Notice the string within double quotes is within parentheses. So I could change that message inside there to whatever I wanted to print out on the screen. Now, any questions about that? How we see these different sections of our program? All of our code has to go in this main method as we first get started. All right, does that make sense? Now let's go back to our code. And you can put some notes in that Word document, save it, or you can just get rid of it if it makes sense to you and it's not something that you need to keep. It's just like it, that it kind of makes sense to everybody to see it in color that way. Now, what happens if I'm missing one of those curly braces? I'm just going to get rid of this last one. I don't like it. Made me mad. It's gone. Now, first thing that happens is I get a little red underline on the curly brace right above it. If I mouse over that, I'm going to see a message. My message says, a closing curly brace was expected, but I didn't find one. Now, what happens if I try to run this thing anyways with this syntax error? Let's try it. I'll press F5. And I've got some errors. Now, usually I don't want to run my program anyways because I just be running the old version of it, so that won't help me much. So I want to do show errors. And here's my errors down here in my problems tab. It says a closing curly brace was expected. Now, if I double click on this message, well, if I select it, just click on it once, it light bulbs where the error is. And if I double click on it, it should take my mouse pointer up to that position too. So if we have a lot of code, we can click on the error and it'll take us right to it. So let's put our closing curly brace back. And we should see that red line go away as it figures out that everything's all straightened out. It's taking it a second. Sometimes we might have to like press F5 again to actually get it to reevaluate and see that everything's okay. I'll do that. F5. Now it's building and it ran. So I got it fixed. Now we could try eliminating some other curly braces. Let's try it. I'm going to get rid of this one right here at the beginning of my main. I got some weird red underlines, but it doesn't say that it's missing a curly brace, does it? It has no idea. It's like, I don't see your body. Well, my body is the code that comes between my open and closing curly brace. So if we're missing a closing curly brace, we can get a pretty good message out from the system about that. But if we're missing an opening one, it can just cause all sorts of trouble, right? Because it doesn't really know that that's what's wrong. It's like, I think something's wrong. You've got this effed up, but I don't know exactly how. So one curly brace can cost a C# student that's beginning hours and hours and hours, and it can make them drop the class. Don't let a curly brace beat you. That's craziness. You can handle the curly braces. So even though the messages aren't super helpful to me, I know that the first thing I need to check as a beginning C# programmer are my curly braces. My instructor's going to say it. It's going to drive you as crazy as it does when you first started using PCs and they told you to restart it every time you had a problem. Because you know sometimes that's not going to help. But 9 out of 10 times, the problems that new programmers have with C# have to do with curly braces. Notice when I typed that opening curly brace in, code automatically added a closing. I had to get rid of it. It can get really messed up if you're not paying attention. So don't let the curly brace win. You are smarter. You can beat them. Let's try a couple other errors before we go. What if my line of code here seems to end with a semicolon? Is that required? Could I get rid of it? Surely C# would be smart enough to know that that's the end of my line of code without that semicolon. Let's try it. Giving me eventually the little red underline, and it's pretty clear. It says a semicolon was expected, and I didn't find one. Let's try to run it anyways. We should see errors. And then if we show our errors, again, it says a semicolon was expected. Now, notice that this one line of code that's our actual program code is the only one that has a semicolon on it. All of these other lines of code that have opening and closing curly braces after them, they do not have semicolons. So again, that can be confusing to people. Only actual code that does not contain a body has a semicolon. Anything that has a body has opening and closing curly braces instead. Do you have a question?
So they're kind of like headings.
Yeah, they're like headings. And these are like our sentences exactly. So that's where we are with it.
For some reason, mine's still showing a
Little error
I
there.
have to run it again.
Yeah, run it again to make it go away. And that seems to be a Visual Studio Code thing.
Okay, I got you.
Does that make it go away? So yeah, that's unfortunate because with the real Visual Studio, it would go away as soon as we fixed it. But let's try another thing. What if we get rid of like our closing double quote? Right away, my semicolon turned red. C# knows this statement is not right. Now, does it know why? If I mouse over it, it does not. Let's see what the light bulb says. Nothing. It says you could show some fixes. I could do all these weird things. So it's trying to figure it out. Whenever I start a string with a double quote, but I don't end it, the compiler is just searching for the end of that string. It's ignoring all of the code it sees, just looking for that closing double quote. So it, again, can't give us a very good message. So whenever we get weird things like that, we want to check our minor things first. My string, when it was in double quotes, was like a different color, wasn't it? I'm going to run it now that I fixed it. So C# Visual Studio Code knows this is a string. That's why it's made it orange. But if we're missing the end of it, it doesn't know where it ever ends. What if we're missing the beginning double quote? Now it's not a string at all, right? The compiler is just like totally confused. I have no idea why you have a new line, why you go to a new line when you haven't finished this line. So some of our messages can be a little misleading. I'm going to put my double quote back in there. It's good. Okay, we should be set. I don't know. Let's see if there's anything we need to do to save it. I think we're good. Let's close Visual Studio Code. And then let's open it again. And see what it remembers for us. So pretty nice. It remembers what project we were working on, what CS or C# code we were looking at, and it shows us our code. So it can spoil you if you're working on the same thing for a while, but that's kind of handy. Perfect. Any questions? You guys have just done great.
Yeah, what are all these like the launch JSON and task.json? What are all those like?
All of these are support files for our project. So we just need to kind of leave them alone for now.
Right.
And as we get further along, we'll find out things that we can change in those files. But for right now, we want to stay focused on the C# the files that end with .cs that have the C# icon. So all of our other support files, we'll just kind of leave them alone for now. But we do notice, like if we click on one, that CS project one, it has kind of almost like some HTML code. So it's just saying what kind of project we have and, where our code is. So we don't need to worry about those support files too much. Any other really good questions like that? You guys are thinking of?
And when we go to create new, as we go, like new project stuff, will they write like the using system and namespace, all that stuff automatically when you create like a new?
Yes. So if we anytime we create a console project like that, it'll automatically give us our hello world. So it should look just like this when we get started, and then we'll be ready to change it because we know where we're going to change things right inside that main. So great job. So we're in really good shape. We go to modules here for where we wanted to be before Monday next week. Make sure that you go through this lesson 1 stuff, get your syllabus quiz done, get your introduction video posted to Discord, and then start reading through chapter 1, making sure you can do these steps on your own on your computer at home so that if you have any trouble, you can bring it to us or we can get it resolved. Next time on Monday, we'll be looking at getting together with our study groups, and for our lab, we'll start on this REPL course. So you don't need to worry about looking at it before then. We'll get started on it together Monday, and if we need to update the due date on it, we will, but I think we'll be able to finish it Monday together without any problem. So we'll get all that done. Any questions before we go? Great job. We saw a lot. I think we've already learned a lot today. So look forward to seeing you Monday. Have a great weekend. So feels like the week's over and it's just Wednesday.
You said that reader of the book for putting on the Visual Studio and stuff.
Yeah, just make sure you can get Visual
Is all-
Studio Code installed on yours.
Gotcha.
Visual Studio Code seems like a little bit more manual work than regular Visual Studio.
It is. And I've got to say, as a bad person, that's why I haven't used it a lot.
In my intro to programming, we did C#, but we used just regular Studio, and it's kind of taken a little bit of getting.
Yes, it definitely will take us a little bit of getting used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm a Visual Studio fan for sure.
Yeah, so they take time.
Do what?
They take time.
Arrays.
Yeah, the arrays take a lot of typing.
Yes. C# can be really, really wordy for sure.
Oh, Python. I didn't have an easy time with Python.
You didn't? No.
I'm kind of hoping I might get this.
Yeah, it's a little bit more structured. So.
Yeah. And everything, yeah, like with the curly braces and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
You miss anything and it's a mess.
Yeah, that's the only problem